Ladies and gentlemen, given the meat shortages that are now on everyone's mind, a lot of people have their eyes, their attention on food and on the fact that we're in the middle of a battle for the control of our food supply. And we need to talk more about this in light of these recent events. And while I did a report earlier today about the fact that the same factors that are at play causing the meat shortages, shutting down the meat factories, imposing social distancing within them, which means they can only process 50 to 60% of their usual production capacity, all of those same factors are now coming into play with everything in agriculture, right? The farm workers' unions and activists, and especially the media fear factory, and the blue governors especially, seem to be conspiring quite literally to create an environment where all food production is throttled back like that. And so please see my report earlier today, which was called Meat Shortages Are Just the Start. There are forces creating food shortages. But I want to step back. That's a forward-looking thing to make sure that people know this is just the beginning and we all need to be growing our own food. I want to step back, though, from that and sort of do a look back at how we got here and what's actually going on so that we can appreciate the full gravity of the situation. It's not just that Tyson did some investments in plant-based meats a few years ago with Bill Gates. No, this is a long-standing agenda. And so I want to sort of do a recap of a lot of the research that I've shared on the Ice Age Farmer channel over these past few years and try and condense it down into a little digestible video this evening. It's a ton that we're going to cover, but it's all relevant and pretty important given what's going on right now. So here we go. This is a technocratic transhumanist takeover of our food supply and their attempt to completely consolidate control over it and transitively control over you into the hands of a very small number of the powers that be, the elite, the ruling cryptocracy, whatever you want to call them, the cult. It's fine with me. I want to begin, though, nearly 100 years ago with an essay that a top UK state official published in, of all places, Cosmo magazine in 1929. This is a guy named Lord Birkenhead, who came out under his wig and wrote this essay, which was called A Startling Prophetic Look into the Future. Its author, Lord Birkenhead, is not some harebrained fanatic. He is one of the foremost statesmen in England, and he'll be looking ahead to 2029. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Lord Birkenhead talks about something like the internet and genetic engineering, how we'll be using CRISPR-like technologies. He has a few misses, but he's pretty on point on a few of these things, given that he was writing nearly 100 years ago. But specifically from this essay, I want to draw attention to these aspects where he talks about agriculture and how it will be made a thing of the past. So Lord Birkenhead, Cosmo, 1929, writes, by 2029, agriculture, if not abolished completely, will be in decay, at least in civilized lands. This development will involve the perfection of synthetic foodstuffs. Proteins, in fact, there are two possibilities for this. Either they will be produced synthetically, or else the more prized varieties of animal foods, like beef or chicken, will be grown in a suitable media in the lab. He's talking about lab-grown meats. From one parent steak of choice tenderness, it will be possible to grow as large and juicy a steak as you want. So long as the parent is supplied with the correct chemical nourishment, it will just keep growing indefinitely, perhaps eternally. Writes Lord Birkenhead in 1929, since the beginnings of history, the city has been a parasite on the countryside. In 2029, finally, science will make the city a self-supporting unit, and Britain a land of labs capable of feeding no matter how many millions of mouths without importing anything. Many might bewail this prospect, for they might insist that a nourishing agricultural peasantry is a sound basis of political life. In other words, there are going to be Luddites who don't want this to happen. We're going to have to plan for an evolution of a stable industrial society. And that's what we're living through right now, is their planned devolution from self-sufficient farms into their controlled cities. Such an undertaking should not lie beyond human wit. Indeed, they think they can pull it off. So that's what we're living through, ladies and gentlemen, is this revolution, as Lord Birkenhead wrote 100 years ago, to take control over all food production, to move it from the countryside into the cities in a very a satanic inversion of the way that the cities have to date been a plague, sucking the life force and, of course, the food and the resources from all of the countryside. Now, how has this revolution of agriculture and of control, this inversion, taken place? Well, let's look back a little bit at the early years, and I'll go fast because a lot of us are already familiar with GMO and sort of the things that have been leading up over the past 20 to 30 years to where we are now. And plus, I want to get to the really meaty stuff, which has only happened quickly in these last couple of years. But briefly, the USDA was established in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln. It became more and more funded, as government agencies do, and was closely, although its reports rolls up to the executive branch, to the State Department, it is in close contact with the Defense Department and is frequently used as an implement of war. In fact, it was used to spread toxic Rockefeller petrochemical agriculture out to the rest of the world and make them dependent on petrochemicals and on the United States technologies for just as we are here, right? To spread that dependence out to the rest of the world. The Rockefeller Foundation as well got heavily involved, as I just said, got really involved in this agriculture and on making sure that it was their kind of agriculture. They did the same things that they did to healthcare, where they squeezed out all the holistic practitioners and then insisted that you could only use their toxic petrochemical-based pharmaceuticals to treat healthcare transitions. They pushed out by taking over all the medical schools. They made sure that they got rid of holistic medicine and only their pharmacia were served up to as a sick care system. So weeding from the Rockefeller Foundation's own library here, agriculture, in fact, we read, was one of the earliest concerns of the Rockefeller philanthropists. We considered adding an ag division specifically in our 1928 organization, and I include this just to point out how long they have been thinking about trying to extend influence, trying to gain influence over the production of food. Even back in 1928, when Lord Birkenhead was writing his essays about the future of lab-grown meat and farms being a thing of the past, indeed, the Rockefellers were already expending their masses of economic and social capital to influence agriculture. At the time, however, they didn't start a formal ag organization. They were more interested in science, medicine, and public health. And boy, you can tell we are feeling the effects of each of those three today. A completely, as I said, inverted sick care system. It's more that inversion. You see, that's a theme that these elites adhere to. It's satanic inversion, changing the truth into the false. But I digress. The Rockefellers launched in 1943 the Mexican Agricultural Program because they needed a place where they could do whatever they wanted. It literally says this is their own library. We needed a region in which we could work more freely. So we applied sciences to our crops. We eventually realized, especially during World War II, that food production, it would be critical to achieving world peace. In other words, to our agenda for the New World Order. The Foundation identified hunger as a root cause of larger problems and a means for control. And so the Rockefellers continued investing in that. They really heavily influenced the USDA, as I mentioned, to make sure that that influence was expended outwards using the military arm of the United States to gain that influence throughout the rest of the world. You can read a lot about this in a great book by F. William Ingdahl called The Seeds of Destruction, which details the history of the USDA and the Rockefeller influence in it and around the world. And he's pretty clear about this being part of the agenda for genetic manipulation and eventually taking over humans, the transhumanist greater movement here. Now, when we look back at the way that these seed companies have absolutely taken over every aspect of agriculture. They've done that through a series of mergers and acquisitions. Monsanto looks like this, building up over time by acquiring every seed company out there. More and more genetics. They sucked into these giant corporate webs. Monsanto is one. It's gotten a lot of public attention. Of course, it goes back to Agent Orange and all this nonsense, chemical warfare. Syngenta is another. You can see this history, these trees of consolidation, further consolidating control. It's the same thing I'm talking about tonight. Further consolidating control of the genetics and of agriculture and food production as a whole over time as they buy up more and more of these companies that were once independent. Syngenta, of course, only recently was, in fact, in 2017, was purchased by Chinese state-run, state-owned ChemChina. So one of the big seed companies that controls everything we eat is now owned by China. And then this consolidation wasn't just those two companies, Monsanto and Syngenta, it's all of them. And the consolidation continued until just a few years ago. It was known that there were just six seed companies, just like the media companies that control everything you see, right? The Viacoms and the Comcasts. We were down to, through those mergers and acquisitions, only 6 companies that controlled everything. And then only in this last decade have those further consolidated in some very public things you've probably heard about, like the Bayer's acquisition of Monsanto, Dow merging with DuPont, and like I said, China's state-owned chemical company, ChemChina, buying Syngenta. That means now we're down to like 4 companies that literally control almost exclusively in their hands the genetic material for all food crops in the world. It's a stunning situation. It's equally ludicrous as the media companies being owned by just a few, as all the consolidation of control. But when we're talking about something that is a gift from God, the genetic diversity that feeds people, that provides us seed sovereignty and food sovereignty, then that's just a crime against humanity. It's an absolute travesty to witness this. And this is why activists like Shiva Vandana have been talking about and fighting this for a long time. Now, the Gates Foundation, in fact, I think I just lost a tab. Yes, those same companies, those seed companies, now the big 3, big 4, whatever you want to call them, have now been funneling a lot of their resources into something called ag tech. And that's what I'm going to be working to get to and talk more about here in just a second. But first, I also just want to mention, because there's such a player in everything, the Gates Foundation. Fortunately, they're getting a lot of bad press right now, all of which they deserve. But here from the Gates Foundation, I wanted to bring your attention to the fact that they worked with the Rockefeller Foundation. Bill and Melinda Gates and the Rockefeller Foundations formed an alliance to help spur the Green Revolution in Africa. Now, the Green Revolution sounds fantastic. Reading here, the foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation announced today that they will form an alliance to contribute to the Green Revolution in Africa. This is going to dramatically increase the productivity of small farms and, always sounds good. This effort builds on the work of the Rockefeller Foundation's work through the 1940s and 1960s to launch what is known as the first Green Revolution. This second wave we're doing now is more like the Gene Revolution, where Gates Foundation funding is used to scan the DNA of a bunch of these crops and, like I said, further reconcile all of the genetic diversity down into things that they control. Take the best aspects from everything out there and then patent it and claim it for their own. It's disgusting. But, this isn't, as often with these philanthropic claims, this isn't a good thing. The original quote from the Gates Foundation, or actually this is from the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, the original Green Revolution was a huge success in many parts of the world. I, for one, challenge that statement, and so too does Vandana Shiva, who I just mentioned, is fighting against this and has been for longer than I've been alive probably now. I met her recently and had the opportunity to speak with her, and it was an honor because she has been fighting this same fight that you and I are talking about tonight, the fight to maintain sovereignty over our food system. It's a fight that is escalating. It's the food war, right? But from her book, which is called The Violence of the Green Revolution, Third World Agriculture, Ecology, and Politics, she takes quite a different stance with respect to the effects of the Green Revolution. In fact, in her view, the impact of the first Green Revolution on the breadbasket of India, from whence she comes, was shown to be, in fact, just a quick fix that was promised. It was given a short-term fix and output that pushed aside serious pursuit of real alternative agricultural strategies that were grounded in respect for environmental wisdom, for the social structures that make India what it has been, and an egalitarian, needs-oriented agriculture consisted with the village-based endogenous political traditions of Gandhism. In fact, they just go in and format the agriculture, whatever your practices were before, and whatever impacts this may have on your society, we really don't care. You're going to use our seeds. You're going to use our chemicals. That's what the Green Revolution has done. And that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we've ended up in a situation where Indian farmer suicides are at a pandemic levels, to use a word that we probably shouldn't right now, because they destroyed these people's livelihood. They came in and they overwrote the way they've been doing things for thousands of years. And although there were quick boosts in yields by using this new Terminator seed for your first season, in fact, those don't materialize. For one thing, your yields drop off over time. And then more importantly, any economic gain you would get from that is immediately thrown out the window because you have to go back and buy those seeds again the next year. So it is a losing proposition across the board for farmers, for consumers who wanted that food but now can't get it because the yields are dropping. The only winners are the people that want to control the food supply, the seed companies. But a lot of this is known about GMO and how bad it is for you, about the Terminator seeds and how bad it is for everybody. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to keep pushing forward on this new Gates, Rockefeller-funded Green Revolution 2. And in fact, just this year, in 2020, Gates Foundation announced that things were moving too slowly, that the Green Revolution was not moving fast enough. And so they've thrown even more money, this is just this year, 2020, at something called Gates Ag 1, yet another push to get farmers into high tech. Last week, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation announced that it's going to set up yet another institute to advance the enablement of resilient, yield-enhancing seeds and get this technology into third world countries. From the initiative's announcement, quote, "We didn't think that our research was flowing down to the crops that matter the most to farmers in a time frame that could reach them. It's not happening fast enough. We're not getting control. We need it now." They are all in this year in 2020, and I think it's increasingly clear why, because all of their agendas are steamrolling forward at full velocity this year. They are making a mad grab for power, and they want that to be successful globally. So Gates Ag 1 this year, we got to get the look at this. This is their verbiage. We got to get the products from our labs into the fields faster and on a massive scale. So this is their throwing money at the problem, doing whatever they can to take ag tech and this new world, this new replacement agriculture, not just in Silicon Valley, but everywhere in the world. That's what Ag 1 is all about. But what is it that they're getting from the labs into the global farms and replacing the small farmers? Let's talk about that. In just the last few years, something called ag tech, agricultural technology, has really come into its own. It is the unholy alliance of big tech and big data and big ag. That's ag tech. Big data, big ag, and big tech all put together in an unholy alliance. What that means is that farmers have been increasingly under assault by companies that are doing flyovers using GPS mapping, by tractors and harvesters and combines that are all collecting data and logging it and sending it back to the cloud for analysis offline, and increasingly pushing towards this, collecting as much data in the name of precision agriculture, of smart farming. So we can see how digital agriculture and big data are coming together in order to, sustainably feed the world. It was always in the name of, we got to feed a growing population, and we have to do it in a sustainable way. How can we do it? Well, big data and analytics are making headlines for transforming other industries, so perhaps we can try that here in agriculture. We'll use the Internet of Things. We'll use 5G, which the FCC passed a $1 billion grant specifically to get 5G into rural areas to enable smart farming. So you can see government, it's called private-public partnerships. They're all in to get these things implemented as quickly as possible. What does this ag tech do? It is billions, multiple billions. In fact, here, you see it's There, $4.6 billion since 2015 into ag tech, into these new companies that are being formed. Not the big seed companies, although they're making investments, but that's the model, right? Is just to throw money at a ton of different small startups and see what sticks. And some of those will stick. They'll create a wave of agriculture unicorns, companies that become multi-billion-dollar companies. Among them right now is this technology FieldView, which was created by the Climate Corporation, which is purchased by Monsanto, which many would argue is why Bayer purchased Monsanto, in spite of the fact that it looks like they had that poison pill of the glyphosate liabilities. Well, never mind that. They wanted the data from FieldView, and they wanted to be able to do predictive analytics. What else is rolled into ag tech? It's not just collecting every bit of data, this total information awareness, to which I will return here momentarily. It's also, in the words of some of these investors, a new, literally, quote, a new form of agriculture, a replacement form of agriculture that will do away with this barbarous relic of farms, these old ways, animal agriculture, all the things that the UN IPCC says we must get rid of. We must end meat and animal agriculture. Well, that's what the NGOs and the United Nations have been saying has to happen. That's their agenda. So how is it being executed? Well, it's by the people with the money and the resources, and they've been investing in ag tech to replace the things that the UN is saying have to go the way of the dodo bird. This new agriculture is being spearheaded by a lot of small companies, but among the larger players in this ag tech space are one here funded largely by Jeff Bezos, by Japanese billionaire Masayoshi Son, and also by Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, who I think now is working with the State Department. These are deep state players through and through. From TechCrunch, billionaires are making it rain on plenty.ag, the indoor farming startup. They promise that they'll be able to have yields that are 530 times greater. Plans, while they're only growing right now in a small factory in San Francisco, plans are afoot for new farms in regions around the world. In fact, anywhere there is a population center. Now we're starting to see that the billionaires are putting their money into realizing the dream that Lord Birkenhead articulated nearly 100 years ago in Cosmo, when he said, we will invert this paradigm. We will create science. We'll create labs in the cities that will feed as many people as we need to. We will print food with these indoor vertical farms and with this lab-cultured meat. And then the cities will take over the world, the smart cities of the future. So this is it. This is them putting billions of dollars into achieving this long-standing agenda. But wait, there's more, and a lot of it. They're talking about fully automating these greenhouses. Just as I mentioned in my earlier update, they want to create slaughterhouse robots that will fully automate. This is across the food supply, ladies and gentlemen. The hydroponic robotic future of farming in greenhouses. And of course, they have the same ideas behind, and plenty of, I'm talking millions of dollars of investment into wholly automated robotic insect protein farms. So the future, this is a transhumanist future where people don't have anything to do with producing food now. It's been completely turned into a robotic enterprise that can be done with hydroponic chemicals, with no sunshine, just artificial lights in the indoor farms. We're taking everything out of the soil and taking it into the control of the elites and the chemical companies, and codifying your dependence on them to be able to feed yourself. Here it is. The giant automated cricket farm is designed to make bugs a mainstream source of protein. If this is the big food trend, we need to do it fast, and we need to grow a lot of them. We need to scale this up rapidly to make the UN's words come into fruition. And so, like I said, they're funding this. We're going to be able to grow millions of crickets 24 hours a day. It's beautiful. Okay. Here is the article about climate companies FieldView and how they're trying to get as many people on it through their series of acquisitions. Bayer acquiring Monsanto, which acquired Climate Corp. And they don't even mince words. They say this is a platform play which means we need to get as many people on it. We want people on the platform. The value there is the more and more people we get on the platform, the more and more data we have. Yes, data, the currency of the future, because it feeds the AI. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. The more valuable this becomes, the better data we have. We want total information awareness. Then the better we can grow food, is their suggestion. All of this really is starting to come together. But now let's talk about the lab-grown meat that Lord Birkenhead described so well, and that's finally getting some attention now, given that we're having the meat shortages, right? You can't go to Wendy's locations and find beef on the menu. It's a burger place, but they're not serving burgers because there are meat shortages thanks to the virus. And so now we realize why, for the last decade or so, there have been hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars plowed into fake meat, even by including the very meat companies that just as Monsanto and Syngenta over time bought up all of the seed companies they could, so too has Tyson and Smithfield over the last 2 decades here been buying up all of the independent pork and chicken production that they could. And now they have complete control over that entire industry. They've basically consolidated control over our protein production into these very few small hands. And as soon as they did it, they turned around and started making investments into plant-based and cell-cultured meat. It's absolutely remarkable how just brazen the entire thing is.